Oh hi, come on in. I have a beautiful new cheese recipe to share with you. Let me show you how to make sweet Canela cheese. With any cheese making recipe, remember to sterilize your equipment in boiling water and lay it out so it's ready to use. You'll also want to remember to remove your hand jewelry, such as rings or bracelets. While the intro was rolling, I'm pretty sure you were Googling this cheese. You may be thinking, what is this sweet Canela? I've never heard of it before. The milk needs to heat to 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 Celsius, and that'll take about 20 minutes. So this is the perfect time to tell you the story. I'll be visiting family over the holidays this year, and my brother asked if I could bring a Manchego. I hadn't really made a Manchego before, so I did some research, and of course Manchego is made with sheep's milk. A Manchego made with cow's milk is technically called an Hispanico. So I did my research on that cheese, and then I wondered, because we were headed into the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, I thought it would be neat to incorporate cinnamon. And cinnamon in Spanish is canela. So after Googling it a little bit, I found this cheese called Canela that won the American Cheese Society Gold Award of 2012 and has won numerous awards since then. So of course I was intrigued, and I looked up the description of the recipe and then put together one that I thought maybe would approximate something similar. And this cheese will be rubbed in both cinnamon and sweet paprika, so I decided to call it Sweet Canela. Once it's reached 86 degrees, you can turn off the heat. I'm using two cultures today. The first is the mesophilic culture called MM100, and I'm using a 1/4 teaspoon of that. And then I'm also using an adjunct culture called Flav 54, and I'm using 1/8 of a teaspoon of that. This will rehydrate for 5 minutes, and then we'll stir it into the milk for 1 minute. Flav 54 tends to give the cheese a buttery, smooth flavor. I'll leave a link to these cultures in the description box. And then just pop the lid on and let this cheese acidify for 30 minutes. A few minutes before the coagulation stage, take a couple of moments to prep the next set of ingredients. They need to be diluted in a 1/4 cup of non-chlorinated water. The first one is calcium chloride. We're putting soluble calcium back into the milk because it was lost during the heat treatment of pasteurization, and that will help to set a better curd, which in turn will help improve the yield. Now we'll add the rennet. We'll take 3/4 of a teaspoon. Now we will add these ingredients to the milk, calcium chloride first. Stir that in for 1 minute. And now we'll add in the rennet and stir that in for 1 minute. That looks good. So we'll place the lid on the pot and we will let this rest for 45 minutes. We'll see you in 45 minutes. While I'm waiting for the cheese to coagulate, let me introduce you to my little kitchen helper, YumYum. She is the star of the show. She hangs out with me here in the kitchen, helps me make cheese. She's a pretty sweet kitchen companion. Now it's time to cut the curd, but I guess it's really time to cut the curd. First, let's check for a clean break. You can check for a clean cut in a number of ways. You can take a cut right into the center of the mass, pull it back, and you would expect to see some yellowish green liquid seeping back into the cut. And that is what I'm seeing here, so that's a good thing. Another way to check for a clean break is to insert the knife at a 45-degree angle and then pull up towards the ceiling and wait for it to split. There it is. That is a clean break. And it means we can cut the curd. We'll cut this curd first vertically and then horizontally. Cut it into 1/2-inch cubes. That looks good. Now cover the pot and let these curds heal for 5 minutes. There's a commonality in many Manchego recipes or Hispanico recipes, and it involves the way the curds are cut. They're cut into very small pieces. So for this next second curd cut, I'm going to use a long-handled whisk. Now, before we start this, I don't want you to treat this like the way you would whisk eggs, but instead think of it like a cutting tool. You'll want to very gently cut these cubes into smaller pieces. I'm going to take the long-handled whisk and I'm going to plunge it all the way to the bottom and then just pull it up. And you'll want to take this all the way around the edge. Nice and easy. The curds are very fragile right now. And so you just want to take a very gentle approach. What you can do if you don't have one, you can take your spoon and you can reach all the way to the bottom of the pot and then bring up the curds like so and just whisk them into the smaller pieces. So that's how you can make it work with the short-handled whisk. This process should take you probably about 10 minutes. Over the next 20 minutes, you'll stir the curds occasionally and gently from the bottom to the top. The heat is not on yet. We're just going to take a nice, easy, gentle stir. This is your opportunity to check to make sure your curd cuts are nice and even and uniform. I noticed one here that is too big. See that? You can just quickly take care of that during this 20-minute stir. All right, I think that looks pretty even. Let me show you what they look like. Here we go. All right, see that? They're pretty small. I would say they're somewhere between unpopped kernels of corn and peanuts. I think that's the perfect size before we start cooking them. Now it's time to raise the temperature. We're going to take this from 86 degrees Fahrenheit to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 38 Celsius. And we're going to do that over a 35-minute period of time. So that's 2 degrees Fahrenheit for every 5 minutes. You want to take this nice and slow. You do not want to heat up the curds too quickly. And most importantly, you don't want to overshoot the target temperature of 100 degrees. I'm going to stir this with an up and down motion, nice and easy. That's the cheesemaker stir. Your goal over the next 35 minutes is to stir frequently and prevent these curds from matting together. If you see a mat, kind of like this one right here, you'll want to cut it apart with your spoon or shake it apart. Once 35 minutes has elapsed and you've reached the temperature of 100 degrees Fahrenheit, go ahead and turn off the heat. Cover the pot and allow these curds to sink to the bottom for 10 minutes. The next step is interesting because it involves pressing the curds underway. Let me show you my setup. You're going to need 2 sanitized pots, one to catch the majority of the whey, and another to submerge the curds. I found a colander that fits perfectly into here. so I can take this whole business and place it into the sink. All right, here we go. Drain the whey from the pot down to the curd level. And now drain the curds into the colander. Some of the whey is going to come with it. That's a good thing. Ooh, nice. Now situate the curds into the whey. You can press on them with your hand. Might have a little too much whey here. Now you'll take a sanitized plate and press it onto the curds, just like that. And then place 8 pounds of pressure onto the plate. Now, here's the good thing. A gallon of milk or whey weighs 8 pounds, so pretty easy. Make sure that this bottom is sanitized because the whey could come up past that, so you want to make sure that you've cleaned this completely. And let this press under the whey for 20 minutes. You may wonder why we took the extra step to press under the whey. Pressing under the whey helps to ensure a smooth textured cheese with minimal mechanical holes. Let me show you this mold. This is a 2 to 4 pound Manchego mold with an insert, and it will be responsible for making the pretty basket design on our cheese, which is typical of a Manchego or a Hispanico cheese. Let me show you. The full mold is 7.5 inches in diameter, but with the insert, it is right at 6 inches. It's a pretty cool mold. I use it for a lot of cheeses, not just Manchego or Hispanico. I'll put a link in the description box below so you can take a look. Now we will release the curd mass from the whey. And it should have turned into this one big mass, which it has. Yeah, that's awesome. See that? And now you'll tear apart the mass into just 3 or 4 pieces, no more than that. Place them into your cheesecloth lined mold. Here. Hopefully you can see better. Okay, looks good. Now take this and press them down. And then fold the tails of the cheesecloth over the pieces. Place your follower on top. It's called a follower because as the cheese continues to press, it will reduce down into the mold, so you'll need something to follow the cheese to continue the pressing. And then just assemble the press. There will be 3 separate pressings at different weights. We'll start first with a light weight at 8 pounds for 1 hour. Pressing in stages, starting with a light press at first, helps to ensure that there's no whey trapped inside the cheese, and that will help prevent your cheese from becoming bitter. This is just 5 minutes into the 8-pound press, and you'll see we have just a nice light drip. The whey is clear, just the way it should be. After the 8-pound 1 hour press, remove the cheese from the press, take off the cheesecloth, flip the cheese over, wrap it in a new cheesecloth, and place it back into the press. Fold the tails of the cheesecloth over the cheese, and then place back the followers, and press at 15 pounds for 2 hours. After the 15-pound, 2-hour medium to light press is complete, remove the cheese from the press and remove the cheesecloth. Flip it over again and place the cheese back into the press, but this time without the cheesecloth. This will help ensure that the basket mold pattern is preserved on the cheese. Press this cheese at 30 pounds for 5 hours. Good morning. Let's get this cheese out of the mold. Sometimes this insert wants to stay pressed inside the mold, so let me show you a trick how to get it out. Gravity and heat are your friends. Oh yeah, look at that beauty. What a gorgeous cheese. Whew. I'm just gonna bring this in nice and close so you can take a look. Isn't that awesome? Let's get it into the brine. Time, temperature, and saturation percentage all play a role in the final salt level of the cheese. I'm using an 18% brine solution, and I'm going to brine it for a total of 9 hours. I'll flip it halfway at the 4.5 hour mark, and I'll be brining this at room temperature today. I'm using a follower to make sure that the cheese is fully submerged. Ooh, I have too much brine in here. That's better. Make sure that the cheese and the brine are at the same temperature when the cheese enters the brine. That piece is very important. Once the cheese is out of the brine, set it on a rack with good airflow at room temperature for 1 to 2 days. Place a food tent on top to keep any little critters away. Like this one. Here's an easy way to tell if the cheese is dry enough for the next step. Simply take a paper towel and place it on the top of the cheese. Press down for about 15 to 20 seconds. Pull it back up, and if you see moisture, it isn't dry enough yet. But if you don't see any, like this, it's ready to go. The next step is to make a slurry of olive oil. Take a tablespoon of olive oil, and I'm using the best olive oil I have. A friend of mine lives in Spain, and he sent this to me. So it makes it kind of special. To the oil, you'll add a teaspoon of cinnamon and a teaspoon of sweet paprika. And by that I mean not smoked paprika. So any paprika really will do. And then just mix it together. Hi. Thank you. This is the fun part. It's where the beauty of the basket mold really comes alive. You'll take this slurry and you'll press in the oil all around the cheese. When I learned that traditional Manchegos and Hispanicos were made with woven baskets back in the day, I just knew I had to get my hands on one of these molds. Speaking of molds, what the artisan cheesemakers would do, and still do some today, is they would take the mold that was growing on the outside of the rind and scrape it off a little bit, and then they would push it in, not unlike what I'm doing right now with the spices, to give it that dark look on the outside of the rind. I don't want to do that. I wouldn't say I'm moldophobic, but I think I like this idea better. I used the entire slurry on this 3-pound cheese. Now just let it rest at room temperature for an hour or two, just long enough for some of the oil to begin to absorb into the cheese. And then we'll vac seal it. Just beautiful. The vacuum seal will pull some of the oil to the outer edges of the bag. That's okay, that's nothing to worry about. And then let it age at 54 degrees or 12 Celsius for 4 weeks or up to a year. Oh my goodness. I just checked this footage and I realized I just went through this entire tasting without the mic on. So I'm gonna try this piece again and see if I can help explain to you what I've been tasting. And hopefully this time you can hear it better. And luckily for me, I get to taste this cheese again. All right. So first of all, the paste itself is nice and dense, and it's definitely creamy. It slices well, and it has almost a butterscotch-like aroma. And I'm quite certain that's coming from the cinnamon and the sweet paprika that's around the rim. But it really smells, I just keep thinking it smells like a cinnamon roll or a sweetbread. So let's taste it. I'm glad I didn't have the mic on earlier because I get more. It's delightful. The paste itself is smooth. It's creamy. I wouldn't say that the cinnamon is penetrating through the cheese. That's not what's happening. But the cheese itself is mild and creamy. And I think it's going to come into its own. I'm definitely going to hold back a piece of this or maybe make another one and let it age for an entire year because I think that this is going to become more intense. It's buttery, but it's not like Butterkäse. It's not the same thing at all. And the paste of the cheese is very different from Butterkäse. It's its own for sure. It really is a wonderful cheese. And I think it is going to be the perfect addition to a holiday table. I also think this is a great cheese to try if you only have 4 or 5 weeks of time before you have to go to a family event. So if you didn't plan early enough in the year and are concerned about getting a beautifully aged cheese to the holiday table, do this one. I'm sure it will delight your family and friends. I hope it will delight mine, especially my brother. Thank you so much for watching and taking this journey with me. I will see you in the next video.